Hey, thanks for joining me today for episode 58 of Podcasting Your Brand. I'm your host, producer Jaime, providing learning lessons for you to podcast your brand. And today I'm going to share a podcasting 101 topic, your podcast's website. This episode is brought to you by my own brand, Flintstone Media. Listen in and let's do this. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. This one is many years in the making because it combines my love of podcasting with my past experience as a website designer and developer. And just before I learned about the power of podcasting, I learned about the power of SEO and having a good website for your business. And so once I realized that I wanted to build my business to focus on podcast production and further my career as a professional podcast host and producer, I made every effort to capitalize on every skill I had under my belt. And that has included watching my SEO efforts pay off over the years. And while on episode 57, I mentioned that the SEO for your podcast begins with your keywords and how you set up your show's hosting account to maximize its discoverability on podcast platforms, that's just one part of it. And that effort is fairly set it and forget it. But the ongoing SEO effort that will pay off dividends for the discoverability of your podcast and your brand is having a good website. And here's why your podcast website, or at least a landing page for it on your main website, is so important. First, it creates a home base for your show that you can constantly drive traffic to. Second, other platforms that you have no control over whatsoever, they could go away tomorrow. So if all your effort is into LinkedIn or all of your podcast marketing real estate effort is in Instagram or any other platform, it could go away tomorrow. So you want your own website. And also having your own website for your show truly acts as a hub for boosting your overall SEO, which I'll cover more in depth as a 102 topic on the next episode. But building a website for your show, or again, at least a landing page for it on your pre-existing website, is absolutely crucial. So let's start our conversation today by talking about your website structure and framework. Your website should act like your podcast's digital reputation home base. So if you use it in the right way, it can really make a major difference to the success of your podcast. Now, my company, Flintstone Media's roots were in digital marketing, primarily website design and development, because I started it back in 2014. Before there was even enough awareness of what a podcast was, let alone a demand for production services. That wasn't all happening in 2014. So at least a good half of my business for a good while was website design and development. So I brought that experience with me with everything I did in building my business and my own podcast. Everything I do has a website presence as its hub. Some shows, like Finding Florida, have their own website. And that one is findingfloridapodcast.com, by the way. And I've also built or rebuild, redesign, managed websites for podcast networks like floridapodcastnetwork.com. And I've also built landing pages for podcasts on pre-existing websites, such as the web presence for this show. If you go to podcastingyourbrand.com, you realize quickly that it's just a vanity URL. It's a web address that is super easy to remember. So I snatched it up actually a long time ago. But if you go to podcastingyourbrand.com, you'll quickly see there's no website there. Nope. Instead, that URL forwards you to the landing page for this show. But that landing page exists on my main business website, flintstonemedia.com, because the two are so tethered together. So that's why that option of having it be a landing page on my main website made a lot of sense. So I've supported podcasts and podcast-related projects of all kinds in all kinds of ways through website builds. And that's what I'll be going over with you today to encourage you to either A, create a web presence for your show if you don't already have one, or B, make sure the website you do already have for your show checks off these essential boxes. Now, as a side note, My preferred website platform to build on has for a long time been WordPress for a multitude of reasons I won't bore you with, but I've loved WordPress for years. In fact, I've learned to build websites kind of right before other platforms like Wix and Squarespace even came on board and became popular and made website building more user-friendly. But I do love WordPress. Again, lots of reasons I won't tell you. I still prefer WordPress to be my website builder of choice, with one exception. One exception at all, and it's Podpage, podpage.com. Podpage came on the scene a few years ago and is one of the primary reasons why my team and I stopped offering full website building services for our clients' podcasts. Because if you're building a brand new website for your podcast, you truly can't do it any easier than with Podpage. And the team over there is SEO savvy, and they built Podpage with SEO in mind. But essentially how it works, and I promise you, it's so easy. Your mind is going to be blown. All you do is just take your RSS feed URL, which is that web address for all the data of your show, which you use when submitting your show to the platforms. Take that RSS feed URL for your show and just plug it into Podpage, and it will build an entire website for your show in like 5 minutes. It's amazing and super easy. In fact, I truly can't even believe that it's really a thing, that it's so simple to use. And once you auto-generate the basic framework website from Podpage, then you can just add additional pages and things to it. So for me, I still prefer to build all my stuff in WordPress, but I also love Podpage, and Podpage is what we've used to build the website for Podfest podcast. So I'll put a link to Podpage in the show notes to make it really, really easy for you to check out. Okay, so let's get into my few quick notes on your website's framework. I'm not going to take a deep dive on this, I promise. I don't want your eyes to glaze over, but I will actually put links in the show notes to some Business in the Bedroom episodes where I do take a deep dive on website building. But I want to mention a couple of key things that are super important concepts for you to know because they impact your SEO. And as a reminder, SEO is search engine optimization. When someone turns to Google to search for a topic that happens to be related to your show, wouldn't it be awesome if Google served up your podcast in the first page of its search results? The gold is on that first page of search results. So you want to be there, and Google better ranks websites that keep their platform, their theme, and their plugins continuously updated. So you need to do that. Make sure the back-end framework of your website, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, get a website developer because they will. Make sure that your platform, your framework, your theme, your plugins, all of that stuff is continuously updated. You want to make sure that you rank well with Google. Google wants to make sure that your site can't be hacked, all that kind of thing. And also, whether you have a business website that your podcast has a landing page on, or you have a full website for your show, make sure that you do hire a good web developer so they can maintain your website's backend for the long haul and keep it up to date and keep your SSL certificates and firewalls current and active, all that stuff. Google generally ranks higher sites with better framework, better security, SSL certificates, firewalls, the whole 9 yards. So be sure, 1, you're keeping your framework updated. 2, keeping your site secure. And 3, have a well-organized structure to your website. So next, I'll talk about that structure and your website's design and what content you need to be sure you have on your website or your landing page for your podcast in order to satisfy your users when they visit. So first off, stylistically, you want your website to match the tone of your show and to feel really, really fresh. So if your show art has a certain palette to it, match that to your website as an example. If your show art has certain elements on it, put those on your website. Okay. And also create a good, clean user experience. Have your main navigation appear where it's expected to be, typically at the top of the page. Remember, if you try to be too cute about your site design, you can have visitors bounce right back off because they can't find what they're looking for. Imagine going to a website and not being able to find the menu because it's place too cute. Put the main navigation at the top and then organize that navigation in a way that makes sense. I'll get into what should be included in your website in a second, but the idea is that once you have your website content and are putting the main navigation menu together, organize it so that the sub-menu items appear under their right header objects so visitors can find what they're looking for easily. So, for example, if you have a place on your site that talks about you as a host, which you should, then your host profile page most likely should appear as an item under your About page on your main navigation, because that's where the people are going to be looking for it. So that's where it should be. But having this predictable navigation menu accomplishes a few things. First, Google loves nice, well-organized navigation menus. But more importantly, if your site organization makes sense and your visitors can find what they're looking for, they will stay on your site longer. And aside from the obvious benefit of people taking in more of your stuff and sticking around, the amount of time the average visitor stays on your site is also a major SEO driver. So you want that average time to tick up because it's a good user experience. And I'll share extra tips and tricks for extending the average visitor time for your podcast website on the next episode as I take this conversation into Podcasting 102 territory. But if your site provides a good user experience, they get what they came there to get and had an easy time finding it, the more likely they are to come back over and over again and to share it as well. All of that, staying on the site longer, coming back over and over again and sharing it with others, all of that is great for your SEO. So that's what you want. All right, aside from the basic framework, being secure and all that stuff, aside from your design, matching the tone of your show, and being well organized, there are key content elements that you should have on your website, no matter what your design is. Firstly, I hope this one's obvious, the title of your show. And also your show art would be great to appear on your website. Hello. But also your show's description. Who is the show for? What will people get out of it? What problems does it solve? That kind of a thing. And you should also have space that talks about you as the host. Share your headshot, share your bio. Also include any links to anything else that a potential visitor or listener might be interested in, like any books that you've written or courses that you offer. All that kind of stuff. Have that within a space talking about you as the host. And you want to be sure to include space above the fold for your most recent podcast episodes. Above the fold just means the top portion of the screen that is visible when the page loads before anybody scrolls anything. When the page first loads, what they see there is called above the fold. Now, depending on the type of device being used, how big the screen is, et cetera, how much is shown may change. And I won't bog you down with the technical weeds of that, but try to have your most recent episodes accessible somewhere near the top of your main landing page for your show. I personally usually like to have the 3 most recent episodes appear above the fold, but you want to have them up high so they are very attractive to be clicked on by your new potential listener. But then make sure you have space on your site, whether it's a section on your landing page, or if you have a full website for your show, it can be its own landing page or a section of the home page, but somewhere you should have all of your episodes displayed and available to check out. And finally, also have a space dedicated to providing links to your show on all the major platforms: iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Amazon, iHeartRadio, et cetera, so that people can click on the link to subscribe to your podcast on their preferred player of choice. And you can make those links eye-catching by using the logos of the platforms themselves for people to click on, and call the section something like subscribe now or whatever, or find the show on your favorite podcast player, something like that. Give it a header to draw attention to it. So that's the essential podcast content to have on your website: your show title, description, and art, info about the audience it's for, your headshot, bio, and other relevant information about you, and links to your stuff and everything since you're the host, access to all of your episodes, most recent ones displayed when they first connect to your website or landing page, and then all the episodes accessible elsewhere. And finally, links to subscribe to your show on various major platforms. And if you have sponsors, then highlight them on your website too. Or if you have a media kit, then link to that. Anything extra that would be relevant and someone would expect to find on your website, make sure that it's available on your website. Also, you want to make it super easy for people to connect with you. So list links to your social media handles. Have those links in the header and or footer of your website, but also have a space on the page where all the links to your social media accounts are displayed too. So similar to having an area full of buttons that link through to your show on different podcast platforms, you can also use the social media platform logos to link to your social media. So the area is also eye-catching as well. As soon as somebody's eyes land on it, they know exactly that that's a whole bunch of links to your social media. Also include a page on your website with your contact information, your email address, for example, phone number if you're comfortable with that. And it's also always good practice to have a form on there that they can fill out to send you a message. But just make sure that form goes to an actual email address that you actually check. So when you create a form, send yourself a test email and just make sure everything that's supposed to be triggered with it actually gets triggered. And one extra tip is to occasionally visit the websites for your closest competition. That is a really good way to be sure that your website is keeping up with others in your space so you don't get passed up by potential listeners simply because your site looks outdated. And bonus, you can see if your competitors are highlighting things in a new way on their site, and that can give you really good ideas for your site. All right. So let's talk about something that has become critically important over these last few years. More and more people are using their smartphones and their tablets to roam through websites, not their laptops or desktops, okay? Especially if they click through to something from their social media, they're probably on their cell phone. So having a site that is mobile friendly for your podcast is a must. So much so that many site builders like Podpage have that functionality embedded automatically. But essentially, what being mobile friendly means is building your site in such a way that it displays most effectively based on the device and the browser that the visitor is using. So if on a desktop, I expect to display a grid of episodes as an example, let's say 6 in each row, displaying 2 rows at a time. That would look really great, really, really good on a big screen on a laptop. But if on a cell phone, those 2 rows of 6 episode thumbnails would be so teeny tiny in order to fit that you wouldn't even be able to see the details anymore. So you'll want to pay attention to how the pages on your website appear across different mobile devices. Just go ahead and hit publish and then pick up your phone, pick up your tablet, and just go to the website and see how it displays. The bottom line to maximize the positive impact on SEO for your website is that the listener's experience using your website has to keep them on your website. And again, I'll share some more specific tips and tricks and other things that you can do besides just the basic framework and design to keep people on your website. I'll do that in the next episode because that's more level 102. And I'll include a link in the show notes to a really amazing resource I found on making your website mobile friendly because the details are way beyond the scope of this show, but it's good to have that information available at your fingertips whenever you or your web developer need it. But I'll close out my chat on websites and landing pages for your podcast today with one last tip. Every once in a while, pencil it in to take a good critical look at your site design, just to keep it fresh. Look through your pages, find any stats or copy or images, anything like that that could use updating. Reassess the organization of your main navigation menu. Make sure that no links are broken, just all of that stuff. Just do a basic website gut check every once in a while. Again, if you're not a website design developer, a really easy, quick, and cheap option is Podpage. So I'll have a link for that in the show notes for you. But I'll also include a couple of examples for you too, so you can see what I've been talking about. A couple of examples of websites that really bring these concepts to life. So one website that hits pretty much all of these concepts out of the park, is for my friend's show in his podcast network called Back of the Cereal Box. So backofthecerealbox.fun. I'll include a link in the show notes to it. It's a really, really good example. My buddy John Pica does a phenomenal job of that show and that website. He's been podcasting longer than me since like the dawn of dinosaurs. He's a really good person to follow in the space as well, John Pica. Again, it's backofthecerealbox.fun. And findingfloridapodcast.com is another one that I'll link in the show notes for you. And that's actually my own website that I built quite a few years ago, and it's very, very different from backofthecerealbox.fun. So two websites that take these concepts, execute them both very well, but very, very differently. So I'll include links to both of those in the show notes so you can expand your ideas for your podcast website. Now, it's important for me today to share a few notes as well on what not to do. Social media marketing is fantastic, but social media is not SEO. So I want to impress upon you that if you've been solely focused on social media efforts, you're missing a powerful opportunity to create a bunch of little magnets towards your podcast through focused SEO-specific efforts, such as keywords, as I explored on the last couple of episodes with you, or through website works, which of course I covered to you on this episode. And I will take a much deeper dive into that on the next episode. But the bottom line is not to rely on your social media efforts as a replacement for SEO efforts for your podcast. That is a big no-no. Also, do not trust SEO solicitors. I don't know about you, but I get like 2 or 3 emails a week from this person and that person promising major moves up in the Google rankings. But think about it for a second. If they knew how to do that, if they knew how to make you super discoverable, wouldn't they just be using those same skills to have customers find them? Why would they be sending out cold call solicitation emails? They wouldn't. And it's because they're not good at it. They are not SEO experts. So do not trust SEO solicitors. And as a final note, I mentioned it earlier, but I want to mention it again. I'll be providing links in the show notes to my past Business in the Bedroom episodes, so you can dive much further with me into the topic of SEO if you'd like. I'm trying to be very conscious on this show that it's going to be attracting listeners of all different kinds, and you may or may not have a deep dive of website background. And if you do, I'm not going to bore you by telling a whole bunch of stuff you already know. But if you don't, this episode gives you the good basics, and the links in the show notes will give you the much deeper dive if you want to take it. So check those out. It'll be to Business in the Bedroom, episode 11, 12, and 13. Website relevancy gets talked about a lot more on those episodes. Google Analytics gets talked about on those episodes. I dive into backlinks, all kinds of things. So check out the links in the show notes. And good thing, it's technically the same show because that's like season 1 of this show. So truly all you have to do is just scroll up on your podcast player that you're listening to me right now on. You're welcome. Well, have you heard me mention the Owl app yet? Of course you have, but be sure to download it today so you can be monetizing your expertise. Let people pick your brain on the Owl app, spelled with 2 W's and 2 L's, after they have first picked their payment method. Sign up with my referral code PL954123 and get your $10 credit. Then catch me on there for your very own one-on-one podcast coaching session. And be sure to subscribe to one of my other shows, the new Owl podcast. We're exploring developing your expertise by welcoming experts from the Owl app who are all masters of their field. So listen in to the Owl podcast to connect, to learn, and to grow. And remember that I have a whole host of free tips for you on my website. Just check out flintstonemedia.com/free tips. Thanks for tuning in to Podcasting Your Brand. In this chapter of the show, I'm revealing how you can harness the power of podcasting to expand your brand. So come and pick up what I've been putting down since 2014. Avoid common mistakes and propel your podcasting and branding forward. And if you have questions or are interested in becoming a sponsoring brand of this show, don't be shy. Reach out to me at Jaime, spelled Jaime, at flintstonemedia.com. It's producer Jaime signing off for now. Remember, the only thing more powerful than your voice is your spirit to use it. So turn that mic on.